This is Restaurants, and I welcome you to a very special episode where I'll be sharing back-to-back unboxings and quick impressions of two recent purchases which I guess are both related to this hobby. I guess. For today, I'll be taking a quick look at the CA-53 calculator watch, why I decided to get another Casio, then run you through the watch's basic specs and features. Then for my fellow Back to the Future fans out there, you might want to stick all the way to the end of the video where I'll be sharing a detailed montage of that DeLorean featured in the intro. I'll be assigning chapters in case you might be more interested in that over the watch we have in review. I'm sure most of us who grew up in the 80s, if not every kid from the 80s, at some point wished for a Casio databank despite knowing that getting mom or dad's approval was something far from happening. Well, those rare kids who actually owned one might have talked their parents really well into understanding the real reason why we badly wanted the watch back then. We didn't want a watch that we can sneak into our math exams, as tempting as that may have been. We wanted a watch that didn't actually have to be a watch but rather a handy piece of technology, and we were just a bit too old for this. Nearly 40 years later, I find myself reliving that very same infatuation, only this time for the very opposite reason. The very same watch I once wanted for its futuristic appeal has just charmed its way back into my attention with the promise of taking me back into the past. And now that I'm totally in charge of my purchases, I'm absolutely not delaying that decision, not for another year. And here it is, a childhood grail for less than 20. I have no idea how much this cost back then, but do have a feeling that the current price may actually be proportionately cheaper. But seriously, I'm a kid in high spirits right now. Unboxing this cheap watch has brought back memories from my growing up years more than any other piece that came into my collection. Well, it's not exactly the same CA-50 that Marty McFly wore in Back to the Future 1, but a nearly identical remake released 4 years later in 1988. The CA-53 would nonetheless appear in parts 2 and 3 of the movie series and up until very recently make a few notable big and small screen appearances. Let's take a closer look. Very familiar Casio resin case, vented resin band, signed plastic buckle, acrylic crystal in front, and stainless steel case back held in by 4 screws. Aside from the keypad, nothing really seems so striking with this one. Let me walk you through some measurements before heading on to the watch's features. 34mm across, 42.7 lug to lug, 8mm thin, and 20mm lugs. Quite an unusual lug width really for Casios, which typically come with 18. Here it is on my 6 1/4 inch wrist for reference. The watch weighs only 25 grams and it literally feels next to having nothing on. Now onto the features. Basic time and date display with the option for 12 and 24 hour formats, an 8-digit calculator, daily alarms and hourly chimes, dual time, and a stopwatch. I'll try to guide you through those in more detail in a separate video in case you might actually be interested in using any of those features. I'll be leaving a link to that video somewhere in the description below. To be honest, I don't see myself using this watch beyond the time screen. Let's admit it, these Casios may be the granddaddy of the modern day smartwatch, but I don't think it's smart enough in today's context. But we don't buy into these watches today to get any practical use out of their features, do we? Our phones can certainly handle more complex mathematical equations than this 40-year-old piece of genius. In fact, this watch does fall behind in several attributes compared to the other Casios in my collection. The smaller F91 offers better screen legibility with its bigger and sharper display. It even has a side light to aid that somehow, which while proving to be inadequate, is arguably better than having no sort of illumination at all, as is the case with the CA-53. This AE1200 on the other hand, for about the same money has again a more legible display, more customizable alarms, and a world time feature that is way ahead of the CA-53's dual time keeping capability. Aside from being a Hollywood wannabe, I actually think this is the more practical purchase. The only feature that actually sets the CA-53 apart from the other watches in Casio's lineup is obviously the calculator feature, which after nearly 4 decades is in fact ancient rather than high-tech. Those teeny buttons on the keypad can be really frustrating to operate, and the button labels aside from those for the digits are nearly impossible to read. Moreover, don't you think the addition of more buttons on this watch may have somewhat compromised its water resistance? I'm confident that it can hold up to its claim of 30 meters, but everyone knows that the F91 with the same rating can go well beyond that. But in spite of its failings, I believe this legendary piece of technology /screen sensation /retro icon would undoubtedly stay relevant among us watch enthusiasts all the way into the very distant future for being a very exemplary reminder of the past. That's it for the watch and time for this one. This DeLorean is a 124 replica from the California-based company Jada Toys. I actually got one in for the purpose of staging this Casio review without any plans of giving it a separate feature. But I was really surprised at how impressive this looked in person compared to the pictures from the product page, so I thought some fans here may actually find this useful. These are currently available for less than $30 on Amazon, and I'll let you be the judge if it's actually worth that money. If you know of better alternatives for about the same price, please do share them in the comment section below.